welcome to Comic Books and You. Today we are going to be covering Asterix, L'Iris Blanc, the White Iris, which was released on the 26th of October 2023, making it the most recent one as the date of a recording. This is a new team working on the character, but unlike, most American comics, when a new team gets involved in a Franco-Belgian comic, generally they just follow with the original story and don't inject anything that they want into it, just working on the project. Also very important to know that Asterix is likely one of the most protected IP in France, as well as one of the biggest one. Basically, this book will probably be in the top sellers of 2023. A lot of people will get it for Christmas, as an example. And does it meet the expectation? Well, that's what we're going to see. But overall, it's actually very surprising just how competent this book is overall. I don't think we need to go through a profound description of the characters here, because they're mainly known throughout the world. Probably the second most well-known character after Tintin from bande dessinée is Asterix. So Asterix is our shorter of the two fellow. Short man, very clever, very wise, of an indeterminate age. I would say he's probably on the younger range of the spectrum. He is not married. Then with Obelix, who's his best friend, who's rather tall and rotund. Never say that he's fat, because that would get you in trouble. He's incredibly strong because he fell into the magic potion when he was a kid, and he has the effect of the potion permanently imbued into him. But he is rather simple compared to his friend. Throughout this particular story, really, Asterix is the most important member of the duo. Obelix is just there to tag along with him and perform some gags along the way. Asterix not really a violent or dangerous individual, but he wants his village and the people living in it to stay alert and to be ready to fight, to defend themselves, because since they're the last free Gauls, that's part of their gimmick. The other set of Gauls that we have in this story, which are fairly important, are Asterix and Bonemine, his wife. So he's the village chief from the province, and he is married with I say beautiful there, I would say homely wife, who's from the capital, from the big city, which is a very basic setup that works really well as far as the characters go. They always get to be a little bit at odds. I mean, they're the main couple in the story. If we look at all the different Asterix story, and often enough, they're just a little bit at odds with each other. But they really love each other, and they like to work together for the good of the village. Bonemine does have a desire to live better, be better, which is an important driving point in this story. Same with the fact that Asterix is usually depicted as old-fashioned and provincial, let's say, which is also very important in this story. We have a villain who's introduced in this book, which is Vicetvertus, Vice and Virtues, basically, who is the head surgeon of Caesar's Legion, and he goes to Gaul to try to help subdue the village using his White Iris philosophy, which is basically a mix of positive thinking, positive living, behaving better, etc. He's very smart and well-spoken. He's not a fighter. He's more of a thinker, as we've saying. Loves to speak in idioms and saying, most of which are kind of unique to this particular story, so they're not like things you would normally see written all the time. And honestly, his true goal is to spread the White Iris philosophy, not to strengthen Rome, not to strengthen Caesar, or even defeat the Gauls. Our story begins as Caesar's mighty legion are up north going to fight the Goth. Unfortunately for them, the troops are not quite motivated, and they don't really want to get into a bloodbath and anything. So they just desert en masse, the entire century just walking off from their centurion. Back in Rome, our good friend Jules is meeting with his generals to try to find a solution. One recommends a simple decimation, because, killing 10% of your troops is always a good idea. Another one proposes to raise the salaries, which Caesar says, well, I've already done that. And things start degenerating a little bit until Vicetvertus our head surgeon recommends just a change of philosophy for the troops instead. In order to prove his worth and the worth of his philosophy, Caesar orders Vicetvertus to go to Gaul in order to defeat the heroic last standing free village of the Gaul. And if he fails, well, he'll have to go and feed the lions directly. Doesn't take too long for our surgeon to show up in Gaul, where he decides to go visit the village after chastising the centurion of Babaorum over his poor eating habit and the treatment of his troops. On his way to the village, he meets with Asterix and Obelix, and Obelix doesn't quite understand what he's saying, and he gets a little bit mad. Vicetvertus fairly quickly calms him down before heading to the village. Once he is there, he starts sweet-talking the local, trying to get into the good graces of everyone. He explains to Alphabetix, the fishmonger, that he probably should be fishing locally rather than, importing the fish from Lutèce. Kind of makes sense. And he also buys an anvil from Setautomatix, the blacksmith. And as he gets his purchases in order on his donkey, he also meets with some of the village's wife, including Bonemine, on which he makes a fairly decent impression. Bonemine heads home, and she gets mad at her husband for his rustic ways, but he manages to smooth things over with some quick thinking and some fast talking. The next day, the doctor heads back to the village, and the people have already started to embrace some of his philosophy. And Asterix is actually quite content with it because it doesn't seem any really negative things. He actually even buys some fish for once. On the other hand, Panoramix does see that there might be something more sinister laying underneath and starts thinking about the situation. In the same stride, Bonemine once again talks with Vicetvertus and chastises her husband as he is cleaning his auroch outside because he is not being respectful to their visitor. As the day passes, more and more people are embroiled with the white iris philosophy. Even the local boors are no longer scared of Obelix. And even the Roman legionnaire actually are not afraid of them. And they're like, oh, well, it'll be a fun fight and it'll be a learning experience for us to fight with you guys. Obelix starts panicking a little bit because that's not what he expects. In the now far more peaceful village, Panoramix, Abrarogorcix, Asterix, and Obelix start talking and start seeing that there might be a loss in vigilance and defensive purposes for the locals, and they try to figure out a plan to get the villagers back in gear. In order to get everybody riled up, they decide to have a concert by Assurance Tourix, the bard, which generally, get people real into fights and hitting each other and the bard especially. Unfortunately, the results are not as expected. Most people being quite more relaxed and even understanding of the particular singing habits of our bard. Asterix decides to take things in his own hands, and the next day when Vicetvertus comes to visit, Asterix tells him to leave and that they no longer need him in the village, using a fancy quote of his own. Vicetvertus kind of gets mad and quickly calms down and starts leaving. But as he does so, he meets with Bonemine outside the village, and he devises a plan with the help of the local centurion to have her accompany him to Lutèce as a tribute to Caesar, and she would be doing so on her own merits. The next morning, Abracaracourcix wakes the entire village up in his despair as he learned that his wife has left for Lutèce without really telling him. Asterix and Obelix decide to go and investigate the camp of Babaorum and learn that Vicetvertus has left with Bonemine, and they decide to go and rescue her with Abracaracourcix. So, Bonemine and Vicetvertus are taking the CGV, the bullet chariot, to Lutèce, and Bonemine is really happy because she's going to go and go talk to her brother and meet with some of her family that is living there. Our heroes, on the other hand, are traveling by regular cart, and they get stopped by Roman soldiers on the way and various other roadblocks. Abracaracourcix is not motivated for any of it. Kind of has to be forced to take the magic potion to fight the Romans. and he doesn't even want to eat the fancy inn meals that they order, etc. In Lutèce, Bonemine meets with her brother, and Vicetvertus starts to introduce her to his high society friends, who are all kind of snobbish jerks, kind of like Bonemine's brother, really. And this is just while Vicetvertus awaits Caesar's arrival to present Bonemine as a tribute. Our heroes finally get to Lutèce. Well, they know they're getting there because they get stuck in a traffic jam. And Asterix gets rather mad when Asterix said that they should be talking to his brother-in-law, since he likely would know what's going on. As Bonemine is mingling with the high society, she starts to miss her husband and her village a little bit. And in order to keep her entertained, Vicetvertus says that they'll go to the theater. And Caesar's arrival gets closer. You can see here some example of modern Gaul art, I guess. Our intermediate hero talk with Homeopathics, Bonemine's brother, and his Greek slave quotes one of the White Iris philosophy quote, which leads them to go to a restaurant, which then leads them to go to the theater, which makes it a fun little detective story. At the theater, our heroes crash the play, right in the middle of it, play which is Waiting for Godot, because, you know, they have to make those kind of jokes, and it leads to a nice little fight that actually everybody can enjoy, including the spectators and the actors. Caesar shows up and chastises Vicetvertus for his failures, but Asterix convinces their old friend Jules to not send him to the lions and just have him serve in the galleys for a little while instead. Nobody has any really bad ending here. Well, going to the galleys is kind of awful, but if you're a positive thinker, maybe not as much. The reunited couple go back to the village, and people are once again happily getting into fights and yelling at each other and getting into trouble. And everybody celebrate with a massive feast with the bard tied up 2-3, as usual. This is a fairly tightly packed story. I really feel that there's more to it than that the author probably wanted to include in this. Would probably have fit 2 full volumes if everything that's been left dangling was put in. But it works fairly well, especially as a self-contained Asterix story, which is what we normally have in those books. It's not meant to be turned into a movie or a TV series or anything either, which is what we had with some of the more recent Asterix books, and it works really well. Here in Quebec, Asterix is generally tied with the Christmas holiday season because all the Asterix movies generally air around the Christmas period in the month of December and early January, when kids are out of school. It's just a tradition that started even before I was born. I think as my brother and sister came back from Europe because my dad was deployed there, I think it was already on TV in like the very early 80s. You had the Asterix specials and things playing on Télé-Québec here. Releasing this book at this time of year is perfect for the Quebec crowd, which will gravitate towards it. And in Europe, every release of Asterix is always a huge draw. So this book has already a very strong built-in audience, and the story itself being very competent is a very fun surprise on top of it. All right, I do have a lot to say about the cover here, but not all of it is really about the cover. We really have at the top Argosini, A. Uderzo, original creators of Asterix, who are basically the first stakeholder, let's say, in Asterix. Everything that has the Asterix name on it basically has to pass by their estate and their lawyers and everything involved. That's why every once in a while they make a movie or something like that, and it doesn't quite pass muster afterwards. And some people get fired and some people get removed and never do another movie in that series again. Like I said, it is one of the most protected IPs in the world. Tintin is also an extremely protected one. You literally can't draw Asterix for fun, because if you draw him for fun and start monetizing it, you are going to be in legal trouble. The regular branding for Asterix has been there since, I think, its inception. It has been extensively strong. But if you look at a lot of the movies, it'll say Asterix et Obelix, but that's for a reason that is because Gérard Depardieu generally plays Obelix, and since he's the biggest star, well, they wanted his name to be in the title. Odd little situations that you have with Asterix once you start digging into it. For the cover itself, it's a really simple one. We've got Asterix on the one side, our villain on the other. Of course, Asterix is on the right side. That's basic composition. We've got the little iris at the bottom, the people who are against the white iris and the people that are for it on the other side. It is not a super strong cover. It has very good composition, not super great colors. But the thing with Asterix is that you don't need it that much because, well, I think the title is going to be what attracts people to it more than anything else. We still have the power dynamic between the two characters. It's kind of hard to know with their facial expression there if they're being complicit or if they're being enemies on that particular picture. We will see what happens as Conrad and Femme Caro keep working on the projects. As I got that book, I immediately saw it. It was a very basic French bande dessinée. It's a hardcover. It's got quality paper. It's durable. It actually has pretty good binding. And it was cheap, $14.95. It's a bit cheaper than what you normally get for bande dessinée. Usually nowadays, probably closer to $18 for a regular issue. As with all of the Asterix books, to my knowledge, we get a basic introduction to our characters in actually just the flap at in the interior, where you have Asterix fighting a Roman soldier, Obelix asking for a magic potion, even though he can't get any. So you have that small basic introduction there. We then get the presentation of the story premise, that it is the lone free village in conquered Gaul in 50 before Christ, and there's the four armored camp, Aquarium, Baba au Rhum, Laudanum, and Petit Bonhomme, all, of course, puns. So we've got our basic introduction to the story here. And this is also another page that is standard in all Asterix that I know of, where we are introduced to some of our characters. The most important one being the three at the top with Asterix, Obelix, the dog, which is Idéfix, which is also pretty important, I would say, depending on the story in the book. Panoramix, the druid. And at the bottom, it's always those two, and I'm not 100% sure why they chose Assurance Tourix, the bard. The village chief kind of makes sense, because he is an important figure that is important in quite a few of the books. You get all the important bits to get you introduced to the story directly in the book. And that's a standard in all Asterix book that I know of. I might need to go and get like a first edition Asterix Le Gaulois. That would probably put me back a couple $1,000 just to see if there's a difference. Might not be worth it. The back cover obviously has the list of all of Asterix books, which is getting rather long nowadays. We've got the actual comics at the top and Album Illustré at the bottom, which are just picture books, basically. They're not actual comics. They use the same art style, the same writing style, but it's an actual, more like kids' picture book than anything else. Some of them are actually adaptations from some of the movies. As far as the art style goes, even though we changed artists a few times actually in Asterix at this point, the style has always remained the same. The coloring has changed a little bit for obvious reasons if you learn about the original artist. But there's very few things here that can really be traced to the current team here in terms of the art. We have some of the exaggeration that might not be there. We've got some of the jokes that wouldn't pass muster probably 20 years ago. But outside of that, there's nothing really unusual or out of the ordinary in here. An important thing about Asterix is that even though the Romans are the enemies, they're not really the bad guys. And here's, even though we have Caesar trying to get his legion back up to snuff for solution, Vicetvertus trying to propose his own way of doing that. If you look at the characters here, none of them, well, one of them looks antipathic. I mean, he looks downright mean, this particular general here, but he's the one who proposes decimation whenever something bad happens. Everyone else here, they look perfectly fine. I mean, they're not exaggerated as bad guys or caricatures to make like Caesar look bad or any of those persons or generals look bad. They're just represented as Romans, basically. Same with the Gauls, if you look at it here. The Gauls are also all represented in extremely caricatural style, with their massive noses generally, and the very stereotypical pants with the different colors. Most of them are going shirtless. So everybody is getting clowned when you look at an Asterix comic. The Romans, the Gauls, the Belgians, the Iberics, the Africans, the Greeks. We saw some Indians in one of the books. Literally everybody is a target for parody here, and everything is exaggerated. The only characters that were really represented as bad guys were the Goths, due to the tiny bit of antipathy between the French, Belgians, and the Germans for the longest time. Caesar is depicted in this one in two different ways, one with the red circlet around his head and one with the actual laurel crown. The red circlet would be closer to what he would wear as consul of Rome, while the golden laurels would be the emperor of Rome. So that's always been a weird situation here. Julius Caesar should probably be dead at this point. I mean, we've been in 50 BC for 50 years with Asterix now. 70 years, actually, with Asterix now or so. So, yeah, we have to remember here, it's really all a caricature. Vicetvertus is also a bit of an odd character. It's hard to tell if he's young or old. All we really have for him is that he is Roman because of his attire, but he doesn't look like the Roman soldiers, the other Roman generals. He has his very unique look to him, which might be a good thing here, that the creators decided to go with a character like this. Fairly simple and basic in the story, but that has his own style and his own thing, so people can get connected with him and move with that character. Outside of the character work, we do get a decent amount of backgrounds throughout this. It's fun to see good backgrounds. Sometimes are not given much nowadays in comics in general. Here we have a fairly nice forest with all sorts of boars. We've got all sorts of plants and everything. Sometimes they do use three-quarter views from the top to just have to draw a little bit of the ground. But even there, in some cases, we do have a bit of texturing to the ground that when we get those three-quarter views. There is very good work in the backgrounds throughout the book. Costumes and patterns are always fun in Asterix. I mean, those are conventional things. I wouldn't ask for more details to be added to any of the characters that we know of, but here we get a very large group of just Gauls going into Lutece, and we get all sorts of costumes, all sorts of drawings of different characters. Some of them kind of look the same, but it kind of works because we are expecting the Gauls to look like this in Asterix. Got our Roman legionnaires on the side there. The legionnaires all have different height, different sizes. Some of them are more comical than other. It's always good to have a good amount of diversity, and we always get that in Asterix. Battle work, unfortunately, is not the strongest here. I mean, it's a very basic setup. It's what we've had in Asterix since forever. Don't expect anything special or fancy from any of those books. They're not meant to be those incredible layouts like we see in some American comics. It's very typical for these books and haven't changed in, once again, about 70 years. The animals we see in this are all properly cartoonish. We've got horses, we've got plenty of boars when they're in the forest. So it's fun to see the different animals, and they're exaggerated like they're supposed to, let's say. We've got a lot of chariot work in this one as well. Not a huge amount of work. I mean, in the end, a chariot is a chariot, but we've got the different military chariots, the regular wagons, little just rickety things, this CGV here, which is an extremely weird and useless design. It would never work in real life, but it was meant for a joke on the bullet train in France. That's the goal of most of those things here. Idefix is not featured heavily in this book. He is in most panels with Obelix, but you only see him do very minor things. It's entertaining to see him, but it's not like in some of the other books where his antics and his running around is a story on its own every once in a while. It really depends on the book, and you need to have a very particular style to be able to do that with a voiceless character. Asterix has always really been a satire of modern Europe and its issues wrapped in a late Roman Republic trappings. Here we see modern art being satirized. One fun thing here is that we're not given any real unusual interaction between the characters in this book, not like you have in some other Asterix books that try to shake the status quo a little bit. If this exact story had been written at the end, let's say, of the Uderzo Goscinny run, we would probably be seeing Obelix being on one side and Asterix being on the other to shake the status quo and give a bit of a dynamic to the story. Here, everything's as it should be. The destabilizing element really comes from the outside and comes in to bring its load of trouble. A fun little aside here, it's not the first time Ordre Alphabetix is told that he probably should be fishing his fish locally rather than importing it from Lutèce, which is modern-day Paris. I mean, their village is right by the sea. Importing it from the capital without any freezing or salting, not the smartest thing ever. Another sort of fun thing to think of here is that Vicetvertus really seems to enjoy the life in the Gaul village, its simplicity, and it's not just a ploy. It's the same with his out with the legionnaires and the military. He genuinely believes in his philosophy, and he wants everybody to accept it. Go with positive thinking, have a good diet, don't drink too much, don't act out in anger. Those are all actually good things. Modern people could also take in stride, and we can see here that he is trying his best to promote it. One thing that we have, though, is the exaggeration of how quickly such a philosophy could take hold on a population. I mean, foreign ideologies and foreign thinking always affects everybody in the end, right? And we see that in modern day all the time. But here, when we look at the philosophy of the White Iris, I can't say it's really a bad philosophy. Maybe for this particular village who needs to keep its guard up and protect itself from the Romans. But in real life, that would be a good thing to aspire to. When we move to the second part of the story, we really pivot the story into a story of love lost between Abracurcix and Bonemine, his wife. Very nice to see that the chief is completely lost without his wife. And Bonemine, even though she's happy for a little bit, she quickly starts to miss her husband, her village, her little things at home. It's really nice that we don't have the strong whammon that we normally have in modern story. I seriously dreaded this as I started reading, and I saw that this was pivoting into a story revolving around Bonemine and her husband. But here, it's really a good couple story that they fall apart a little bit and then come back together lovingly and caringly. The bullet cart and the traffic jams near Lutèce, I mean, those are clearly satirical points that are brought up for modern day issues, especially when they go through the CGV. They keep going yeah, there's going to be a delay because of this. There's going to be a delay because of that. This is the last service for today because one of the horse got hurt. They keep going with things that unfortunately exist in modern life. We have a short subplot here with a protest against slavery, but it's not actually against slavery. It's more a protest for the free men to be better regarded than the slaves and get better treatment than the slaves. The only slave that we actually see in the story is a Greek slave, which was extremely common at the time and kind of busts the regular online argument that white people were never slaves and etc., etc. It is also a fairly sad statement to say that this particular book had a better detective story than many recent Batman comics. We actually had to follow Asterix and Obelix as they gathered clues and went to different places to find where they needed to go. It was extremely simple, but way better than many things I've read recently. The city folk and city life being so much more refined is really parodied well here. I mean, you see the tiny little drinks the people are having, and everybody is always saying that life is so much better in the in the simple village and the simple thing. And that is really a thing that would have pleased the original creators, I would say, because it is a theme that's repeated throughout Asterix in many different books, where cottage life, farm life is better than big cities, etc. That's a classic tale. We get a bit of a parody of actors at the end with the little play there. Good that actors are actually getting mocked every once in a while. It's good to see, especially since that guy seems to be one of those mega over actors, basically. One thing I found weird as I was reading through this a few times here is that it really feels like there's two issues here, and they're split down the middle. Most bande dessinées do not have that split, even when it's meant to have like a continuing story or a story in different part in different acts. Here we have a first issue with Vicetvertus' introduction, getting to the village, spreading his philosophy, which ends with him being kicked out of the village by Asterix. The second issue is the detective story and Vicetvertus bringing Bonemine to Lutèce and the whole chase. It's a bit odd the way it's set up compared to most other bande dessinées I've seen out there. It might just be because I've been reading so many American comics recently, especially some that were poorly paced and poorly split, that I have, I see these kind of setup and these kinds of splits in a book. Overall, however, if you look at the pacing for this book, it is, of course, a bit longer as it's a bande dessinée and it's a single story. It works really well for what it is. While this is far from the best of the Asterix books out there, there's Asterix et Cléopâtre is probably the most famous and popular one, I would say. It's a perfectly acceptable entry in the series. Often enough, when we deal with new creative teams, when they take over, we have issues with tonal shift or thematic shifts. Here, since everything is held with an iron fist, this doesn't really happen. And this is what we should be seeing all the time in American comics. Basically, this is Francophonie's biggest comic book of the year, even though it only came out a few weeks ago. I would love to get the actual end numbers for, let's say, by Christmas or by the start of next year. It's a perfect time to drop the book. It's a perfect environment in Canada. It's always a good environment in Europe. And it's going to sell internationally as well because there's already English, German, I've seen Spanish, I've seen Portuguese, Italian translations of this, likely going to have a Japanese translation as well and Chinese translation as they struck a deal in China earlier with one of the recent movies. This is a book you'll be able to find in translations just about anywhere. Would it be something you should get? Well, if you like Asterix, there's no reason not to. It's not the best. It's definitely not the worst. And it's easy enough to get your hands on. If you want to learn French, it's also a fairly good book to get. It's not too complex. It has a pretty straightforward story. No words that are completely weird. You might not get all the puns at first, but it's good to start learning them as well. So I thank you for listening to me for so long. This has been, of course, a longer video. Keep on reading comics. Keep on enjoying them. I'll keep on reviewing and analyzing them. And I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.